As a creative aspect, TV is one of the best things that we do as a species. Along with music and film and books, they bring out the best creative of all of us. They entertain and they bring so much joy to many. They invoke emotion and enable us to feel things that we bury sometimes deep down. That's what this podcast is for. Welcome to A Million Little TV Shows. This is what I call the breakdown while I break down. Each week I will go through a different TV show, a different season of that TV show, and different episodes of that show. And I will break down not only emotions, but I will break down stories from my life, and let you know why these TV shows mean so much to me, and why I believe that they are some of the most important shows out there. This podcast is here to highlight a lot of smaller TV shows, or TV shows that don't really get a platform, because we know of a bunch of TV shows that get a multitude of different podcasts. Ted Lasso, Game of Thrones, The Office, they've all got several podcasts out there analysing all types of different things. But there's not many out there for the little guy, and that's what I'm trying to highlight. So each week I will go through a different show, different seasons, different episodes, and I will go across all different kinds of genres and different countries to bring you what I believe is some of the best TV out there. So I'm glad you're here with me. I'm glad you're here for this journey. And if you've watched the shows before and you wanted to come here and get an analysis on them and have someone go through them and pick out bits that you might have enjoyed, then I'm glad you are here. If, however, you have never watched the show and you just want to come and have someone talk in your ear about different TV shows, I'm glad you are here. But I hope that it inspires some people to go and seek out these TV shows. They deserve to be watched. They were made with love and care, and they are the same as this podcast, made with love and care. I am your host, Mike, and I will take you through every adventure, every horror, every piece of drama, and I hope that you enjoy the show. Hello there, and welcome back to this A Million Little TV Shows podcast. This is now Season 9, Episode 1, and we are into a brand new season, guys, and I cannot wait to get into it. This season's going to be so much fun. And I just love all the shows that I've been covering so far and will continue to cover in the future. However, this one is an exciting one because this is being done pretty much live. I'm recording this on Thursday the 5th of June because today marks the third season of Ginny Georgia. And the episodes are out. I'm excited to get into it, and that's what I'm going to do. But as for how the rest of the season is going to shape up, we're going to be covering a show called 0 Day, which stars Robert De Niro. We're going to be covering Kevin Can Fuck Himself, the final season of that show for Season 2. We're going to be covering Sharp Objects and Saint X, which are two standalone series. And we're also going to be covering Inside Number 9 Season 8. But all I care about now is getting into today's show, Ginny Georgia. So, spoilers ahead, obviously, but this is Ginny Georgia, Season 3, Episodes 1 to 3. So let's do a bit of a catch-up first before we get into the episode. So, Georgia is someone who was a teen mom and has now grown up to be around about 30-ish. She's most recently moved to a town in Massachusetts where she lives with her daughter Ginny and her son Austin. Ginny and Austin are both from different fathers, and the different fathers are entirely different. Zion, who is Ginny's father, is a lot more bohemian, he's well-travelled, he's sort of a really chilled-out guy. But he doesn't suffer fools either. Austin's father, however, Gil, is aggressive, angry, and he's someone who has plagued Georgia throughout her life. He recently got out of prison and came to find her in this new town that she started living in. But the reason that he was imprisoned was because of something that Georgia already did. She started embezzling funds from his job that he was at, and he got the blame for it. But Georgia has now started to rebuild her life with her new man, Mayor Paul Randolph, who is the, obviously, mayor of the town that she lives in. She has started to live the high life a little bit, especially being in the place that she is, but she is also being investigated because her previous marriage ended when the man that she was married to died under suspicious circumstances, but she managed to get away with it. She ended up inheriting a lot of money, moving to the town that she's now in, and she has started to rebuild her life. However, her former in-laws actually thought that there was something odd going on and ended up having her investigated. And subsequently, she ends up being investigated for the death of another man that she was involved with, and it seems like there is a pattern here. Ginny, however, is someone who has grown up with all this turmoil of her mother, but always tried to respect her as much as possible, but has started to see the flaws within her mother. Obviously, with moving around a lot, she has been a bit like an army brat, which is not a nice term really, but it's the only one I've got right now. So I suppose I could say army kid, where they're moved a lot around the country and go here, there and everywhere and don't really settle or don't really make friends. Wellsbury, this new town in Massachusetts, is the first time that Ginny has started to make friends. This includes her best friends, Maxine, Abby and Nora. They've all sort of joined in a little club together, and even though they've had turmoil between the three of them, they've managed to come out of it stronger. However, Maxine's brother Marcus is the love interest of Ginny. He has been informed by Georgia not to hold Ginny back and to let her go once she actually starts to spread her wings. Georgia only wants the best for Ginny, but gives her it in a way that usually ends up breaking rules or breaking laws. Ginny seems to have the smarts of both her parents, and she has the street smarts of her mother, but the intellectual smarts of her father. But she is also mixed race, which doesn't help in certain situations. In several scenes so far, we've seen her be blamed for trying to rob a store, even though two of the other girls that were with her were the ones that were actually stealing the things that were on display. Ginny did pocket something, but she was the only one who was targeted. And there have been other instances of racial abuse towards her. At the end of season 2, we saw that the culmination of Georgia's past has caught up with her, and even though she can't be tried for her first husband's death, she can certainly be tried for the man's death who she was also potentially involved in, or suspected to be involved in. And that is where we start, because at the end of last season, Georgia was arrested. Episode 1, this wouldn't even be a podcast, which I feel is a little harsh on me, but here we go. And so we can only pick up from one place, and that is literally directly where we left off from. So it's actually a couple of days later, and Ginny is now back at school. Let's not forget that Georgia was actually arrested on her wedding day, and so now she is meant to be having her honeymoon with Paul and is not. She is currently in a lockup. At this point, Georgia has no idea what anyone has on her, and if we remember from last season, Cynthia Fuller had a husband who was on his deathbed. He was hooked up to all types of machines, and it was really taking a toll on her. And Georgia saw that toll, and it was his life that she took. And so that is what everyone is claiming that she has been arrested for. Again, at this point, we don't know what else the police have on her, but nobody is talking to her while she's in jail. Ginny, however, is living life on the outside. Obviously, she hasn't done anything wrong, and she's just getting the brunt of what her mother has done. So essentially, every time she walks around a corridor in school, she gets bullied. People are talking about her, people are looking at her, and it's not the kind of thing that Ginny really needs. Obviously, we know about the anxiety attacks, we know the fact that she's been burning herself, and we know that she's having it rough. With the on-again, off-again relationship of Marcus as well, it can't be easy for her. She's fancied Marcus since day one. And then with everything that happened in the previous season where she got with him and then she didn't get with him, and it's been a total mess. And so now, with her mother doing the things that she's been doing, as well as all the moving around and the uncertain futures, Ginny feels lost. However, Ginny has a great support system around her, and people like Maxine and Marcus, as well as Abby, all manage to stave off the idiots that are basically talking about Ginny. And any time that they try to confront Ginny about anything, at one point Marcus body checks one of them, Maxine tries to scare one of them, and Abby runs off Sam, who tries to hug Ginny in the bathroom. The only one of her group who isn't actually being all that nice to her at this point is Nora. For whatever reason, Nora is being a little bit off with Ginny. I mean, yes, Georgia is the one who is going to be on trial for this, but that's not Ginny's fault, and Nora shouldn't really be treating her that way, but for some reason, this has got to her. Ginny ends up bunking with Abby and ends up going over to her place. They chill out, smoke a little weed and what have you, and just try and get out of the headspace of the fact that Ginny's mum's a killer. Abby tells her about the fact that she has been fooling around with Press, one of the guys from their friend group, who is a bit of a dick to everyone, but for some reason, Abby is into. However, knowing that Ginny and Abby are hanging out more, Max is starting to get jealous of this. Even though she's got her own shit going on, she always seems to claim Ginny as her own, as if, because she brought her into the group, she belongs to Max. But like I say, Max has got her own shit going on. She keeps asking Marcus to ask Silver if she'll go out with her. Marcus, however, keeps telling her, look, that's your thing. You want to come and talk to Silver, come and talk to her. And so eventually she does. She goes over, she sees Silver, and she talks to her, and she eventually asks her out. Well, she asks her to hang out. Ginny, at this point, with all the staring and speculation that she is receiving, just can't handle it. We see earlier on, she starts using the rubber band that is attached to her wrist to give herself that distraction from the anxiety. However, when she's over at Abby's and there is an opportunity to take the lighter that Abby's been using, she does so. So we know that Ginny has been burning herself before, and now she has access to a new lighter. But instead of doing any of that, she admits to Abby that she needs to go and talk to her therapist. And so she sets up an emergency meeting with her. The therapist obviously understands her mother's just been arrested, so it would make sense that Ginny has something to talk about. She goes over and she talks to this woman about what's been going on, and she tells her up straight, I've thought about burning myself. This has got to me way too much, and I have had that thought. But the therapist points out that although it's a bad thing that she's been having these thoughts, she's now done something that she's never done before, which is approach someone else to tell them about this. And it means that Ginny's moving forward with her life. It means that she is starting to think about the consequences of what she's been doing. And not only that, it means that she can open up to her therapist about any and everything, because this has been the biggest thing of Ginny's life, because she's been physically harming herself. Now Ginny and Austin are living with Paul, obviously. He is their stepfather now. But when they get home that night, Zion is also there. Again, Zion and Paul seem to have a decent enough relationship that they can sit and talk together without anything really being awkward. Although let's not forget that Georgia slept with Zion in the last season, so we could understand if there was any tension between the two of them. At the end of last season, Zion actually enrolled Ginny in a program for poetry, and he tells her that tonight is the first night of that particular program, but if she doesn't want to go, she shouldn't have to. Now, I love this scene. I think it's so funny, because you've got Paul and Austin in the background, and you've got Ginny talking to Zion. As Zion is virtually rubbing it in her face that you should go, but not telling her that she should go, but suggesting that, well, doesn't really matter that you're missing the first lesson, you'll catch up. Doesn't really matter that this is something you wanted to do. Yeah, let's focus on the fact that your mother's in jail and you can't do anything about that. Let's not focus on the fact that this is something you're passionate about, but let's just dwell on the past and the fact that things that cannot be changed are the only things that you are willing to let affect you right now. And you can feel that Ginny sees through all this, but you know that Zion is right, and she knows that Zion is right. So eventually she just gives up the ghost and says, okay, I'll go. He also offers her his motorbike, which she gladly takes. When she gets there, however, something interesting happens. So I said towards the end of the last season that I think because of the whole Marcus situation, Ginny will end up meeting someone in this class and will end up being with someone. Now, from what I've seen so far, the tutor that came in, he was a bit of a goof. He was a bit cheeky chappy, but Ginny seemed to react to him differently to what she has done other teachers before. And although I wouldn't say that he is what Ginny would probably go for, I mean, there's potential there. On the other hand, there is a student in the class who makes a joke, and Ginny seems to react to that as well. And so maybe the new love interest does lie in this class, or maybe we are yet to meet someone who is going to join that class. But obviously, if it ends up being the tutor, that is highly inappropriate. Ginny is, I can't remember what the age of her actually is, but we're going to say 15, 16, 17-ish, maybe. We're not sure of the actual timeline of the show right now, because the show has been around for 5 years now, but actually the timeline of the show feels about 6 months. However, if you look at Austin, it definitely doesn't feel like 6 months from the boy he was to the near man he is now. The guy was 10 when he started the show, and he's now 14. And you can see the stark contrast as the show rolls on between the boy he was and the teenager he is. So it's quite funny actually seeing Austin come into this and him look quite different. And actually one thing that changes with Ginny is the fact that she actually changes her name when she announces it in the class. Obviously her name is Virginia. We know her as Ginny due to the title and the fact that that's what her mother calls her, as well as Peach. But in this, she calls herself Gia, which is the end of her mum's name in all fairness. And so maybe this is a new identity that we're going to be seeing while she's in these lessons and with anyone from this class. Instead of Ginny, she's going to be Gia. The one scene I do love from this episode is the bakers having dinner together, because, as I've stated before, I love the dad in this show. I think he's great. I think he's funny. And the main difference about him is that he's deaf. And I love it. I think it's great. I think that having that representation on screen is brilliant. But them all having dinner together, but also signing at the same time, I just find it a lot more engaging as I'm watching the episode. Because the actor is actually deaf, it makes it feel like a stronger scene, because he can be included in it by the simple gesture of everyone knowing ASL. So, yeah, I just love that scene so much. And we just get to see everyone's personality shine through a little bit via that. As for Georgia, we see her mostly in lockup for this episode. Paul gets a lawyer to come in and she talks to him, and he basically says, well, this could be a life sentence if you are done for murder. They want to know if they can get her out and have her out on bail, but she says that the county aren't actually going to be letting her out, and so she needs to prove that she's needed at home to the judge. Then Paul comes to see her, and he tells her that he's trying his best to do everything in his power to get her out of there, but obviously it's not as easy as she thinks it will be. And so we can see that Georgia is panicking now. She's scared. But what Georgia does when she's scared is she flees. And so maybe it's a good thing that she would be staying in jail. But then we see another reason for her to be scared, because the next time she gets a visit, it's from Gil. In the last season, we saw that Gil disappeared after he'd been shot by Austin. But now he is back, and he is threatening Georgia with taking their son away, because Georgia will be locked up, and technically Paul doesn't have a leg to stand on. Gil is Austin's biological father, and potentially that will be in his favour against the court, especially when they find out that the mother is a killer. And as for Ginny, she could have the choice of going with Zion or with Paul, but it would mean that they would end up being split up, and there's no way that Ginny can have legal guardianship of her brother because she's, 14, 15, 16. So Georgia begins to panic. She knows she has to get out, and she knows she has to put on a show when she actually goes to trial. All they're doing at the minute is the arraignment, which will determine whether she is on bail or whether she has to stay in jail. Well, she'd go to prison, in all fairness. Of course, she ends up managing to be able to be totally glam when she actually goes into the courtroom, even though she's been looking a little bit worse for wear. And when she gets in there, she does her usual thing. She turns on the Southern charm and she tries to charm the judge, and the judge ends up going with her and basically lets her out on bail. They put an ankle bracelet on her so that she can't flee because she is a flight risk. So now she has to stay in Wellsbury. But she can go home. We continue to see how Georgia and the kids actually ended up where they are. After Georgia left Gil, or had Gil arrested for embezzlement, and started on her travels across the country, we see that she continues to do everything in her power for her kids. One day, Ginny says that her and Austin are quite hungry, and Georgia does this elaborate parade around this restaurant. She ends up stealing a bunch of money, a bag, some food, and a couple of other items. And we just see how proficient she's got at this act, and the brazenness of it as well. She literally walked out with someone's handbag after stealing it from right next to them. But now that she's out of jail, Ginny comes to her with the ultimate question, because we know that Austin actually saw his mother kill Cynthia's husband. And so when Ginny actually saw how Austin reacted as Georgia was taken away, as soon as they get back home, Ginny takes him upstairs and asks him the question, "What did you see?" Austin confesses all and says that he saw that Georgia did this. Ginny is quite disturbed by this, and obviously then she goes and speaks to her mother. She asks about it, and eventually Georgia cops to not only killing Cynthia's husband, but she also killed her previous husband, Kenny, and her previous partner, Anthony Green. So when she says it's only 3 to Ginny, Ginny just can't believe that it's 3. Now she has killed 3 people. Essentially, does that make her a serial killer by now? And so Ginny's beginning to wonder where the hell it ends. Georgia realises that she's failed her daughter and her son, and that she couldn't protect them all along as she has promised to do, and all she wanted to do was make things better for everyone. And all she's done is begin to make things worse. She feels that she's failed Ginny, and she feels like she's failed Austin, but Ginny reassures her that you've done your best, and as you've always said, it's now us against the world. Episode 2 beep, beep, frickin' beep. So, of course, as we know, Georgia is now home. However, with her being home, Austin isn't sleeping well. And it would seem that he's having a really tough time with everything that's been going on. And so, at night, he's generally been sleeping downstairs instead of in bed. But when Georgia speaks to him about this, he has no answers as to why this is comforting for him. He just knows that it is. But it seems like it's Austin's first day back at school after everything that happened. Ginny, obviously we know that she's already been to school, so I'm not sure why Austin hasn't. But with that being the case, it's also Paul's first day back at work. So right now it's sort of all hands to the pump. They just want to go in and do the things that they need to do. But obviously there's going to be a lot of questions. There's going to be a lot of staring. Like we saw in the last episode, Ginny has already had all of that. She's had the stares, she's had people talking about her. Not that it's going to get any easier, but now the two boys of the family have to have that confrontation as well. Ginny essentially tells Austin, basically, do what I do, which is essentially chin up and say what you want. I don't care. Because that's what Georgia has taught her over the years to do. Anytime that Georgia has been in trouble or moved town or whatever, and Ginny has to integrate into a new place, she just has to stick her chin up and tell the world she doesn't care what people think. And so now she has passed that on to Austin. Of course, with Georgia being homebound, due to the ankle monitor that she's got on, she can't take Austin to school, so Ginny has to take him. But she also can't go into work, so Paul is going to have to fit the bill there as well. And so Georgia is going to be sat at home all day, and it seems that every morning she needs to charge this device. Hence the beep, beep, frickin' beep. But before she can go too stir-crazy, which we know Georgia would, Ellen comes over, Maxine and Marcus's mum. She ends up bringing a basket full of goodies over just to sort of stave off the boredom, I suppose. And when she asks Ellen to just ask the question, Ellen says, look, it's really none of my business. Years ago, Marcus had a friend, and his friend ended up being really ill. And when it came to the end, I feel like he suffered more than he should have done. And that maybe if someone had had mercy on him, or been able to take mercy on him, it would have been the better thing for him. So I don't judge anyone for what they do, because I think taking someone out who is in a lot of pain and is towards the end is a good thing. So I'm not saying you did it, but if you did it and it was the right thing to do, then I'm okay with it. Georgia keeps professing that she obviously didn't do it, but at least she knows that she has the backing of Ellen because, well, we all know that she did it. We all saw last season. We know she did it. In this box, however, Ellen has given her some binoculars, so I've got a feeling we're going to end up with a rear window situation at some point around about Halloween for this show, if they do a Halloween special, although technically they probably won't. But with Georgia being locked up and having access to everyone in the neighbourhood through these binoculars, I can see something coming from this. But for now, she's just being very nosy. And so Paul has also gone back to work. He ends up in a spat with Nick, his assistant, the one who Georgia clashed with last season, and the one who had the boyfriend who ended up being the private investigator that was investigating Georgia. And when Paul comes into the office, he just wants to shut out the world. Obviously, everyone looks at him, and very much like Ginny did in the first episode, and very much like Austin is trying to do in school, he just wants to hide. He closes his blinds, he sits in his office, and when Nick comes in and confronts him about this and says, look, we need to start getting on with things, Paul agrees. He says the most important thing right now is making sure that the town is in a good place. However, at this point, someone is lobbying to actually open the borders of this town to big conglomerates, essentially flooding the zone with places like McDonald's and Subway and franchises galore. At the minute, Wellsbury is for the small town people, and as much as that revenue of the big franchises coming in would help, it would shut down a lot of different companies in the area, small businesses that would just see unemployment throughout the town and the loss of that community atmosphere that there currently is. So Paul knows it's important to stop this bill before it actually gets anywhere, and that is what his focus is going to be on from now on. Georgia meets with her lawyer, and his main goal is to make sure that there is doubt within this trial so that hopefully Georgia can get off scot-free. He tells her that they need a killer. They need someone who murdered this man, and if they can give them someone, why does it have to be Georgia? Georgia really doesn't want to go down this route. She just wants to give her story, and that's it. But he tells her, look, it's a murder trial. They're going to want to murder her, so how about we give them Cynthia? We give them enough reasonable doubt so they essentially hang Cynthia instead of hanging Georgia. He tells her that he knows, potentially, that she killed him for the money. They were in a lot of debt because of his medical bills, and therefore it was a drain on her time, a drain on her resources, and she could get rid. He also tells her that if there is any chance of her ever having an affair, which we know she did, with Joe, that maybe that's an avenue we head down. And of course, Georgia knows all about the affair with Joe, and so there could be potential in this case for her, but she really is adamant that she doesn't want to do this. She just wants to tell her truth. Cynthia, early on in the episode, we actually saw her turn up and try and speak to Georgia. And so we know that she's going to be all guns blazing when it comes to making sure Georgia goes down for this. So even though the lawyer is offering something incredibly immoral, there is that chance there that Georgia could take this as a way out. As for Zion in this episode, he gets a call from his mother. It turns out that his mother is really fucking pissed because of everything that's been going on. But when he informs her that Ginny isn't with him, that she is still with Georgia, his mother decides to take things into her own hands. She says that Zion needs to start taking control of the situation and he needs to get Ginny back. That way, if anything happens with Georgia, he can at least look after Ginny. She also wants him to take Austin because she knows that there is no real family around. Again, Paul isn't really their family. Zion has known Austin and Ginny for their entire lives, and they would end up being safe with him. And especially with a grandmother like that who just wants to protect her grandchildren. She does consider Austin as one of them. She just wants to make sure that they get the best. So Zion is now on a mission to try and speak to Georgia and try and get her to, I suppose, turn over custody of both Ginny and Austin to him if the worst should happen. But of course, when Zion can't convince Georgia to do anything like that, because it's Georgia and she's so big-headed, it ends up being the grandmother who comes to town. And of course, Georgia and Lynette have always been at each other's throats, and that is exactly what they do here. Ginny, however, throughout this episode starts in an interesting way, especially when you think about how the ending comes. She started doing running because of her mental health, and it helps her. But because Max feels that Ginny is drifting away from her, she has started to do things with her, and this is one of them. However, Max is one of those people who just doesn't like running, and trust me, I'm one of them as well. And as soon as Ginny stops, it usually takes Max a good while to catch up, and every time that she does, she's just complaining. But the thing about this episode is that Max keeps thinking that Ginny is moving further and further away from her. We see this later on when Ginny has an interaction with Brasher last season, who really helped her out and helps her find her identity more and more, especially as a black woman. But like I said, even though Max has got her own thing going on, she is constantly trying to put herself in Ginny's life, and it seems quite suffocating at times, because if Ginny does anything without Max, Max gets jealous, whereas if Max does something without Ginny, it doesn't matter. It's all about Max. And we see that when she ends up going to a skate park because her potential new girlfriend Silver is going to be there and she wants to hang out with her. She also takes Abby with her, and Abby ends up sort of flirting with Marcus. So there could be something there. There could be something to develop later on, which is obviously going to stir things up for the group as a whole. As for the group, we find out why Nora is in such a bad way. She was quite close to Cynthia's husband and the family, and it seems like his passing at the hands of Georgia has really started to affect her as well, because he was integral to her when she was growing up. So we now start to understand why Nora is being the way that she is. And so, like I say, with Georgia being under house arrest, Ginny offers to take Austin to school. Again, she reiterates that he just needs to be head up, and I don't care what you think, but obviously when he gets into class it's a different matter. He's usually sat across from Cynthia's son, Zach, but today he isn't there. As we find out later in the episode, that very day is Cynthia's husband's funeral, and so that is where Zach will be. But on the table across from Austin is a card that says, "We're sorry for your loss." And Austin, straight away you can see how badly he feels about all of this, knowing that Georgia has done what she's done, and he saw it. And so things are just going to get harder and harder for him, because before, obviously, Zach was Austin's bully before. Yes, they became friends in the second season, but now things are going to change again, because everyone knows that Georgia is culpable for this, or at least they suspect she is, and it's not going to look good, especially if they end up blaming Cynthia for this as well. So there's a lot going on for him, and Ginny sees that this is going to affect him. At school, Ginny obviously learns that it is the day of the funeral, and she knows she has to write a poem for that night's class. She has to write a poem about poems, and so she wants to write one about not caring, because she wants to feel like she doesn't care anymore. However, throughout the class, the tutor keeps informing her that she does care. She cares a lot about this poem, and she wants people to know that she did care. He begins to break down the poem, and essentially she feels seen for the first time. We can see that there is something there for Ginny with this guy. I'm not sure what it is yet, but there does seem to be a little spark whenever he talks about poetry or when he just engages with her. Obviously, like I say, she's called Gia in these classes, and even when her name's called, she doesn't recognise it, but she does seem to start enjoying this class. It does seem to be a place to vent for her, and maybe it's going to start making sense of the world for her. However, Ginny being at school just is a drain on her. We can see that it is, and she decides to take lunch in her car. This is what I referenced earlier when I was talking about Max. Ginny and Bracia have lunch together and they sit and they chat, and Ginny manages to tell her that she's had a rough time of it and that she used to burn herself. She doesn't anymore, but there are hard times for her, and she wants Bracia to know that. She wants Bracia to know that she sees her as a special person and a good friend, and that maybe she needs a good friend in her life, because she needs someone outside of the main friend group, really, but also someone that can be there for her as much as Bracia has been so far. She knows that if she told Max this, Max would just go off on one, and it would be the main headline of everything that went on, whereas she knows Bracia will just keep it to herself. And we're not sure if this is a naive thing from Ginny, because not long after that, Bracia goes and speaks to Max about a play that they're going to do. And when she does, she starts blurting out that she met with Ginny earlier and that she's got a lot going on and that it's so sad and all this stuff. But of course, Max doesn't know about any of the stuff. So Max is now starting to get jealous again because Ginny is being shared around. She doesn't like to share Ginny, whether it's with her brother, whether it's with her friends, whether it's with anyone else. So I can see this being a theme throughout this season. At some point this is going to break them up. They're going to end up having to go at each other, and Max is going to probably become unbearable again. Then we see Ginny at work, and she seems to be having a chilled out night while they're at work. Obviously Joe starts to talk about the whole situation with the franchises moving into the area, and it's the first time Ginny hears of any of this. Just then Cynthia walks in and Ginny walks into the back. Austin tries to make good with Cynthia and just tells her that he's sorry for everything that happened. But Cynthia doesn't really do anything. Like, it's not his fault. She just walks away. However, then Joe goes into the back and finds Ginny hunched over and in the middle of a panic attack. It seems that everything that's been going on with her is getting on top of her, and obviously she just cannot take it. And she is proving that by having these moments, these freak out moments. And so Joe sends her home. When she gets there, she finds her grandmother there, and they end up all having dinner together. And this is where Georgia and Lynette get into it. Ginny, once again, can't handle it and gets up and says, "I'm done," and walks out. As she walks away, her mother does what her mother usually does, and she follows Ginny out the door. Ginny continues to walk, and eventually she stops. Georgia tells her that she can't just keep walking away from her. How dare she walk away? And Ginny says, "Well, you always run away." Ginny then realises something, that Georgia has a boundary now, and that if Ginny wants to run or if Ginny wants to walk away, she can. And she does just that in that very moment. She walks away from her mother for the first time without her mother being able to follow her, and realises the power she now has over her mother. She can go whenever she wants. Georgia has also realised this too. Episode 3, Friends Can Dance. And as you can tell from the title of the episode, there is going to be a dance. Typical high school TV show, you've always got to have a dance at some point, and this is it. And so of course there is the anxiety of everyone either being asked or whether they're going to go or what's going to happen. Obviously Ginny is the centre of attention right now, and she really doesn't want to be paraded around in front of everyone so everyone can continue talking about her. So she's decided not to go. Obviously this has pissed off Max, because a dance like this is just up Max's alley. And this is more justified when Marcus tells them that he's not going to go either. So Ginny feels like it's okay not to go. The one reason she'd want to isn't going, so what's the point? However, that plan is all going to fall apart when Georgia finds out from Ellen that there is a dance at school. Once again, Maxine is all for it, and Marcus won't be. And Ellen is trying to make both of her kids happy. She wants Marcus to go, mainly because she's going to be part of it. She is going to be organising the thing. So she wants Marcus there to make sure that he's happy. But of course, Marcus is still not over Ginny, as we actually heard from the last episode, which I forgot to mention. And Ginny has also confessed that she's still in love with him. So there is still a connection there, but nothing between them happened. And once Loretta shows up and meets Ellen for the first time and has brought shopping for Georgia and the family, she tells Georgia, we need to make sure that Ginny goes to this dance. She needs to get out there and she needs to have a bit of fun. And so those two are going to conspire to actually get her to the dance, even though they are directly opposed to each other. But for Georgia, it feels like Lynette is trying to ensure that when Georgia goes away for the crime that she committed, Ginny has someone in her life as a female influence. That not only being her grandmother, but also Zion's new girlfriend, Simone, who we met last season. And so Loretta takes Ginny over to her dad's place so that they can have dinner together, and while they're there, they actually organise a shopping trip together, which, obviously, since Georgia can't go out, is really going to put her nose out. But while she's over at her dad's, her grandmother makes her realise that this dance will be good for her, and that she's never really had this before. And even Georgia admits earlier on that she's never had this before. They never got to a point at any school that she'd been at where they got to go and have a dance. So for Ginny to have one, and it be the first time properly that she can have this, obviously they've had the sleepover before, but this will be her first dance. And so Georgia just wants her to go and enjoy it, but so does Loretta. And Ginny realises that she's fighting an uphill battle and she gives in. She knows she'll probably enjoy it, but she's just got to get in the mood for it. Of course, Ginny only wants to go with one person, and so she now has to pick up the courage to ask Marcus. Even though they've claimed that they're just friends, again, there is still the feeling there. And after Nora and her boyfriend Jordan end up having a very romantic moment in class, Ginny decides she's just going to outright ask Marcus. Of course, he doesn't want to go. He's still adamant about that, and when he lets her know that, she kind of recoils and is a little bit coy about it and says, look, I didn't mean it, I was just, we were just goofing around. But you can see that she's not happy about any of this. Abby as well is also trying to get the attention of Press, but again, Press isn't bothered. And so it seems like those two will be going alone. Obviously Nora has Jordan and Max has Silver. So at least if they're going alone, they can go together. And so comes the big day. Ginny and her grandmother and Simone end up going dress shopping. However, when they get there, her grandmother picks out something that is not exactly to Ginny's taste, especially for a dance like this. She doesn't see it as that kind of a thing. And when she sees what Abby's going to be wearing, she's quite impressed by it. It's a hot pink number, and she's taken with it. It's here that Simone picks out a really nice dress for Ginny and suggests that maybe she could wear that. And we start to see that Simone might not be a bad fit for Zion, but also she might not be a bad fit when it comes to being an influence for Ginny. Abby, however, is obviously having her own problems. We know that she is hooking up with Press, and we also know that she's not really getting any attention outside of her bedroom from him. He keeps trying it on and he keeps trying to have sex with her, but she hasn't actually had sex with him yet. He tells her he's not bothered about the fact that she wears tape around her legs or whatever it is, and it doesn't put him off. I mean, he's a teenage boy, of course it wouldn't. But at this point it feels like he'd just say anything to get into her good graces. Or into her pants, at least. Abby's only looking for affection. She's just looking for someone to give a shit about her. Obviously her mother and her father have split and she doesn't see her father anymore, and her mother is drinking quite a lot. So Abby doesn't feel seen anymore. And so to have someone like Press who does see her but is only using her for her body, it's not a healthy relationship that she's in. She wants more than just that, but he won't offer it until she offers something else. And so she ends up going down on him, but even after that, she is rejected by him and he walks out. She even tells him that she's been throwing up a lot and he doesn't know how to react. He's a typical teenage boy. He hasn't no fucking clue what to do and doesn't really know how to talk to her about any of this. She's expressing that she has a problem and he walks away and tells her that she probably shouldn't do that. And so while they're out shopping, Abby actually sends a text to the other girls and doesn't put any explanation in there because she doesn't feel like she has to. They're all friends after all, and they can do things on their own or in individual groups. But of course, as soon as Max sees that, she starts texting Nora to try and find out what the hell's going on. Why is Abby and Ginny hanging out so much? She obviously doesn't understand that they've started to have a bond between them. And again, Max is getting jealous. And so that night she invites Ginny over so that they can hang out and play family games together. Obviously Marcus is going to be there, so Ginny will want to be there, and she decides to go over. Abby, however, that night ends up at Press's, and while she's there, she ends up getting mocked for going down on Press. However, when the two boys that are there are called away by their mother, Abby actually hears Sam, the other girl from the group, throwing up in the bathroom, and when she comes out, Abby starts to try and talk to her about what's been going on. She says that she knows the feeling that Sam is having, and she has had it too. Or at least she hints at the fact that she's had it too. And she hints at the fact that she hates her body. And when she tries to get Sam to touch her thighs so that she can feel the tape underneath, Sam takes it in a very different direction and thinks that Abby's coming on to her. She kisses Abby. Abby doesn't recoil and she kisses her back, and then Abby realises something about herself. We always knew that she was bi anyway. She's admitted that as much, but she starts to feel something towards Sam. However, at game night, Marcus is still on this depressive streak right now. And when it's mentioned that Ginny's actually going to the dance, because obviously his mother really wants him to go to this dance, he gets upset and he leaves. Ginny follows him upstairs and tries to talk him round, but he's just not bothered. And eventually Max comes in and tells him, look, kind of do it for Mum. I know you're not great. I know you're not in a great headspace right now, but just do this one thing for her. She needs this. She needs a win right now, and she's just not getting it. She wants to know you're okay, and I know that you can't give her that, but at least give her this right now. And there's something about the way that Max and Marcus support each other, that whenever they really get into each other's heads, they know that the other is saying the right thing. So maybe they should just do the thing. And so later on that night, they all end up going to the dance. However, as well as everything is going between everyone, when Sam and Press turn up together, Abby ends up feeling hurt by this. Even though others are telling her that he's just a dick and that she shouldn't put too much faith in him, she ends up running out. She heads out into the hall, and that's where she meets Marcus. He's come to the dance to support Ginny, but he doesn't want to go inside. And so he's out there drinking, and he looks pretty wasted at the time, and he and Abby head off into another room and start to get drunk together. Later on, they come back out for the dance, and Ginny sees Marcus for the first time that night. They end up dancing together, and they end up kissing. Marcus has made his mother happy, and he's made Ginny happy, but ultimately, he doesn't seem happy by any of it. He's got the girl that he loves on his arm, but he knows that is going to piss Georgia off because he's promised Georgia that he wouldn't wreck Ginny's life. And now he feels like that's all he's going to do. He's going to hold her back the way that Georgia said he would. And like I said before, the way that Marcus and Abby are acting towards each other, there is potential of those two ending up together. Or at least something happening there. And it's all just going to end in tears. Ginny heads off and calls her mum, and she tells her that she loves her and that she wishes that she could be there that night because they're a team at the end of the day. She knows that her and her mother have had issues and that her mother tries hard, but she still loves her. Abby, on the other hand, goes home with Nora because she is pissed. When she gets there, her mum is also pissed, but in a different way. Abby and her mother really get into it, like heavily, and she basically tells her mother how much she isn't a mother towards her, and that maybe if she was that way properly, Abby wouldn't be in the state that she was in. But Abby's mum isn't having any of it, and she just leaves Nora to look after Abby. As for Georgia, after the whole conversation that she has about the dance with Ellen, and then subsequently with Lynette, she starts going a little bit stir-crazy in the house. Lynette is now doing laundry basket after laundry basket for her, and she's sat folding it while watching nothing much on the TV. It's all about the local council, and she is sat watching every bit of it, because she keeps telling Paul that she wants to be still involved in the council, even though she can't, because you shouldn't really have a felon working in a government position. I'm sure we'll get to that when I cover 0 Day. But now she has these binoculars, she's now started to spy on some of her neighbours. One directly across the street from her. She keeps trying to involve herself in his love life in small ways. every time this guy goes out, he's wearing like an Hawaiian shirt or something like that, and Georgia thinks that it's stupid. He obviously ends up coming home and he's always rejected. So Georgia has gone online and bought him a shirt, sent it over to his house, and is hoping that he will wear it the next time he goes out. However, when he starts putting on different shirts instead, Georgia is looking at him at the time. And so when Paul comes in and she tries to get him to go over to talk to this guy, we see how easily manipulated Paul is by his own wife. Now, again, most men are. And so Paul ends up doing things that he just doesn't want to do. He just wants to come home after a hard day and just chill out. But Georgia being Georgia, she won't let this slide until he does the thing that she wants him to do. So he has to go across the road and talk to this guy to convince him to wear a different shirt, while giving the game away that while she's literally being a peeping Tom to these people. It's fucking ridiculous. The next day, Georgia's lawyer comes over and he's talking to her about the case and essentially backs her up a little bit. He says that plausibly the things that she's saying could be true, but he still thinks that going down the route of having Cynthia go down for this would be the better idea. And when she's trying to address the timeline of what happened that very night, Paul interjects because earlier on in the day, he'd actually been speaking to Joe, and Joe told him that he, on the night of Cynthia's husband's death, had returned the glasses that Georgia gave him years ago, and that he was in her house at the time when it's suspected that Cynthia's husband died. So it couldn't have been her, because he was already with her. And so Joe has also offered to go on the stand if needs be, which, obviously with the relationship with him and Cynthia, is going to be a very interesting development, to say the least. George's lawyer heads out with all the information that he's got, and Paul follows him. He asks him exactly what he knows about Georgia and her past, and he tells him, look, I know a lot. I know that things are complicated, but I get it. I understand the backstory of this woman. And it's here that Paul starts to realise that he doesn't really know the backstory of his own wife. He knows bits, but he doesn't know everything. And it seems that the lawyer is now even more clued up than he is. So he feels like he needs more from this, because he doesn't understand his wife anymore. That night, while Ginny heads off to her party, Georgia sits down with Lynette, and she ends up breaking down because she's always felt that Lynette is against her. And Lynette only just wants the best for her and her kids. But she just doesn't see the logic that Georgia has always had, and that is always to run. Lynette would have always offered both her and Zion a decent place to live, especially when they found out that she was pregnant with Ginny. They could have stayed with them. Even as time's gone on and Austin came on the scene and everything that happened around Georgia, Lynette would have still looked after her. And she tells her that she doesn't hate her. She cares for her, but she's concerned, especially about her granddaughter. And Georgia tells her that she's scared. She's scared as well. She doesn't want to go to prison, and she certainly doesn't want to get replaced. And that's what it feels like Lynette is trying to do right now. She's trying to replace her with Simone. And so finally the two come to a reconciliation that actually they're just trying to do the best for Ginny. And now that they both recognise that, hopefully the tensions between the two of them will start to subside. Which is a good thing, because the tensions between the two of them need to subside right now. Because at this very point, we see that Paul is in a meeting with Nick. Nick, in the last episode we saw, was trying to get a job as a campaign manager and was going to be leaving. He tells him that he's tendering his resignation, and Paul tells him, no, you're not. When Nick tries to threaten him with what's going on in the office, he says, I know what's gone on, and I know that you know. I know more about everything to do with you and Georgia than you want to tell me. However, what I don't know is about my wife, and I want to know what you know. Because obviously we know from the previous series that Nick was dating the PI that was investigating Georgia. And so now Paul has to know exactly what is going on with his wife. Now, I'm going to try and keep this short and sweet, but this was an excellent start to the first 3 episodes of this show. You've got a lot of tension going on, as always in this show. You've got a lot of tension between Ginny and Georgia, as well as all the other characters. Max, for instance, is going to be interesting this year. The dynamic that's come between both Abby and Marcus is going to be really interesting, and especially which way Maxine is going to end up swaying in that relationship, because obviously she's known Abby longer, but she has Ginny as this little project, it seems. And that's if she can get her head out of her own arse, especially when it comes to her own relationship. Because what I haven't spoke about in this is the fact that she is still thinking about Sophie, even though she shouldn't be, because she's now with Silver. Obviously the issues between Nora and Ginny are going to be interesting as well as they go forward, and we find out more about what actually happened that day. And it seems that Cynthia's husband actually died after Georgia was there. So potentially Cynthia may have been the one who killed her husband, even though we saw it in the last season that Georgia was the one who killed him. But I don't know, maybe they're going to twist it. It's just with Joe's confession, maybe it does set that doubt. Obviously we know that Joe is conflicted between both Cynthia and Georgia. He's always had this affection for Georgia, but now he has been sleeping with Cynthia. But with the revelations that Paul's just found out, is this going to now be the end of them? They were presenting as a family before, and now it may seem that Georgia is going to end up on her own. Or maybe Paul does what he did before and stands by her. But now he has to know the full truth of what is going on with Georgia. So yeah, very interesting start to the season. Obviously a lot of things going on, and I can't wait to get into the next 4 episodes and then the final 3. But I'm going to reiterate what is going on this season. So, other than covering this new series of Ginny and Georgia, I'm going to cover 0 Day, Kevin Can Fuck Himself Season 2, Sharp Objects, Saint X, and Inside Number 9 Season 8. So I hope you will join me for all of that. But I am done for today. My voice is very hoarse, as you can hear, and I am sick of listening to my own voice. This was a hard day, because this episode comes out tomorrow, and I forgot how hard this is doing it under pressure. But anyway, thank you for listening. I hope you're all doing well out there, and until next time, I will speak to you soon. Bye. As always, thank you for listening to this podcast, and you could really help me and the podcast by giving a like, share, subscribe on all major platforms that you listen to podcasts on. As an independent podcaster, this will just help me exponentially when it comes to actually doing more things with this podcast. I truly do enjoy this, and I absolutely love revisiting these TV shows with you guys. So any engagement from you is always welcome, and I will try and listen to all of you when you give suggestions or just tell me what you think about the podcast. But once again, thank you for listening, and until next time, I will speak to you soon. Bye.